I feel nice.
Welcome back. This is the Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHDS. I'm Dr. Feildman, and we were discussing vaccinations this hour. When we last spoke, which was a few minutes ago, we were talking about the whooping cough portions of the vaccines. It should be noted, by the way, that in response to all the hoopla with the Wakefield controversy, which we talked about earlier in this hour, actually the government took all the mercury out of all the vaccines. So no vaccines for the last 5 years have had any mercury in them at all, with the exception of the adult influenza vaccine. It's the only one that still has mercury in it. Everything else is mercury-free. Of course, does it make a difference? Not likely, because the mercury that was in the vaccines was 0.00001 parts per million, which is...
Are you saying that's less than a fish?
Less than a fish. Much less than a fish. So don't eat your fish, but go get your shots. But it was not only that, but the mercury that was in the vaccines was inorganic mercury. And the body cannot absorb inorganic mercury. It can only absorb organic mercury. But the government took it out anyway just because they didn't want people to be afraid to vaccinate. Clearly that didn't work, but it certainly may have helped. Nonetheless, going back to the whole thing with the whooping cough and the pertussis, we still have a major problem. I'm going to wrap up in this next few minutes to tell you the story about polio. Now, none of you guys have seen polio. Most people haven't seen polio because it disappeared, supposedly, in the late 50s.
Yeah, I know India also just had their last case of polio this year. Their last document. Theoretically, yeah.
But let me tell you about that, because it's very interesting. As of approximately 12 years ago, there had been no reported cases of polio in the Western Hemisphere. And the only places where polio was present was in India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Now, supposedly, India is doing much better.
Yeah.
But what's happened now is that the entire African subcontinent has now recurred with polio. They now have polio all over Africa.
Wow.
When I was a kid, until age 4, we never went to the beaches or to the parks or anywhere in the months of August and September because it was polio season. And I recall going to visit friends of mine who were on iron lungs.
Wow.
And I remember that the rabbi of our synagogue walked with a limp because he had gotten polio. And I remember a child in my kindergarten class who walked with crutches. I remember his name was Mike Silverman, and he had red hair. And so I knew about polio, and I do recall that on the day that they announced the vaccines, our parents lined us up like crazy. There were lines around the block to get the kids vaccinated, unlike today, because our parents were afraid for our lives.
Well, yeah,
and our parents were community-minded. Our parents understood that what affects one child affects the community. That's something that we seem to have lost today.
Well, yeah, also they're living lives without. They never had the vaccine. So when that ability came out to protect their children and their families and their loved ones, I mean, who wouldn't do that? I mean, a good friend of mine's father barely skidded through without getting polio. He was from New York, and he would always make fun of me and Gene, but whenever we would get the flu or something, and always knock us, saying, "Man, you do not know how easy the flu is compared to some of the other things that used to be the norm. The norm at one point was polio."
And let me tell you, the flu wasn't so great either. I know we're coming in close. The flu, by the way, killed thousands of people in 1919.
Mm-hmm.
It was a worldwide epidemic, and tens of thousands of people died.
Wow.
So it ain't so great either.
No,
Depends on which strain.
Yeah.
We got to watch out for ourselves, guys. And this is the Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour. We will be back with you again next month, the first Friday of the month at 11 a.m.